Good evening, everybody. This is President Lemmer. I'm seeing that it's 7 o'clock and we're going to call to order the December 14th, 2020 regular Hazlet Board of Education meeting. If you could please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And I'm going to take a roll call of our board members. Treasurer East.
Here.
Vice President Polverento.
Here.
Trustee Maury.
Here.
Trustee Collins.
Here.
Trustee Mashad.
Here.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wait, I missed somebody. Trustee Maury, did I call you yet?
You got me. Wheeler?
All right, 1, 2, 3.
Cammy.
Who did I miss?
Cammy.
Thank you. Secretary Wheeler.
I'm here.
Thank you. I usually have my list printed out and didn't have that this evening. So my apologies to everybody. Welcome. We're going to move to correspondence. Madam Secretary, do we have any correspondence to report?
Yes, we do. Since our last school board meeting, we received an email from Greg and Tricia Bird. They reached out about reassignment of elementary teachers for a number of students as it relates to our timeline for the particular shift and ultimate goal of a hybrid model. And we received an email from Joy Witten. She shared her thoughts regarding an additional survey at the time of a face-to-face component of at the time that the face-to-face component of the hybrid plan can be announced. In this case, we could determine whether some families feel more comfortable at that particular point in time. Becky Beauregard reached out regarding the timeline for shifts and potential teacher reassignments when choosing to remain virtual for the rest of the school year. And Melissa Spatafor also a timeline for teacher reassignments. And we received an email from Randy Watkins. Randy represents the Lansing branch of the NAACP as first Vice President Education Chair. There was a copy forwarded to us of a recent investigation regarding a racial harassment allegation at Hazlet High School, and also a report to serve as an aid for the high school as it reviews its code of conduct in these matters. And that's it for correspondence since our last meeting.
Thank you very much. We'll now move into public comment. This is the point in the meeting where individuals from the public are invited to address the board. It is not a two-way dialogue or conversation. Comments will not be responded to in the moment. But as appropriate, they will be forwarded on to administrators or other appropriate individuals for follow-up and or might be addressed in the context of any agenda items on the docket for today. So the way we work with online comments is if you would like to speak, we will have you raise your hand in the queue and you will be unmuted and given the opportunity to speak for up to 5 minutes. And if you are dialing in and are not able to use the raise hand feature in Zoom, then you are invited to speak up, or well, sorry, not speak up. You're invited to send an email to hazletk12.mi.us. And Mr. Casson will review those emails and read those out to us. So at this point, I see one person in the queue with a hand raised. It's listed as iPhone Jeff. Mr. Casson, if you can unmute. Looks like iPhone Jeff, you're unmuted. If you could go ahead and introduce yourself with full first and last name, please.
Hi, my name is Jeff Kessner.
Go ahead, sir.
I'd like to focus on 3 topics that have to do with online learning that in mid-Michigan here, and they are fewer students, less engagement, and worsening grades. These are the 3 problems we're running into. There was an article on WLNS on December 9th. They talked about East Lansing, for example, has lost 45 students, mostly in the elementary schools. To quote the East Lansing superintendent, they said, quote, "I know we've had families leave the district to access in-person learning, either at local, private, or charter schools. Absenteeism in Lansing schools, for example, is up 28% in the elementary, 47% in the high school. Nationwide, absenteeism has risen from 8 million before the pandemic to a current 25 million kids that are missing more than 15 days of school." The superintendent of Michigan Center Schools states, quote, "We'll reach out to some of these families and you'll get a parent contact or a student will email a teacher and then they disappear for another 3 weeks," end quote. On top of this, more remote learning students are failing classes. In October, for example, nearly half of Ovid LC students are failing at least 1 class. The Charlotte superintendent states it's students taking classes remotely who struggle the most. The biggest struggle is getting them to participate, end quote. We have known for years that remote learning is not effective. According to a 2018-2019 Michigan Virtual Learning Institute report, only 55% of classes were passed for students learning remotely. The CDC reports that remote learning translates to a learning loss of 50% in math, 30% in reading. So what is the health risk in returning to school? The CDC director stated, quote, "The truth is for kids K through 12, one of the safest places they can be is to remain in school. The data strongly suggests that K through 12 schools are not where we have the challenges," end quote. Dr. Fauci stated recently, quote, "Keep the children in school, and if they're not in school, get them back to school," end quote. American Medical Association stated, quote, "School-aged children who get the virus develop only mild symptoms and recover within 2 weeks. Nationwide, there are 123 kids under the age of 18 who have died from the virus, and that's not traced to school. So out of hundreds of millions of kids, we've got 123. How about the risk to teachers? For teachers under the age of 50, the odds of surviving a COVID infection is 99.9%. If they're under the age of 70, it's 99.5% chance of survival. So let me conclude by saying this. If you want to know the health of a community, look at its young people, look at its schools. I think we can all agree there's a huge problem. Based on the information I have discussed just recently, the current policy to me is just irrational. It has been for months. We need to get back to school ASAP. For example, there's a school district right down the road called Langsburg. They have not shut down. The way they do it, 70% of students attend in the morning from 7:45 to 12:25 in the afternoon, no lunch or recess. The other 30% of students who want to be online do so in the afternoon. In talking to Langsburg leadership, they are so satisfied that they are serving 70% of the parents who want to be in person, and then the other 30% who don't want to be. And speaking to some of the teachers, they told me they are so satisfied that they're actually teaching kids and they're actually learning and they're happy. So I just want to reiterate, I know that we have voted to get the kids back to school, but I know there's a caveat there that may not happen. And I just want to implore our leadership to get these kids back. They need it and we deserve it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I am not currently showing anyone else in the queue for public comments. Mr. Casson, have you received any emails?
No, there have been no emails sent.
Okay, then it looks like we can continue on with the agenda. We are up to superintendent's report. Mr. Cook.
Thank you, President Lemmer. I'm pleased to announce that Hazlet Public Schools was ranked 31st out of 537 school districts by Niche.com in its 2021 Best School Districts in Michigan rankings. These rankings are based on data from the U.S. Department of Education, as well as reviews from students and parents. Rankings factors include state test scores, college readiness, graduation rates, SAT, ACT scores, teacher quality, and public school district ratings. So we're very pleased about that announcement. And that's it. That concludes my report.
Great, thank you very much. That's wonderful news. So we'll go right into our discussion items, the 2019-2020 district audit presentation. We have Mr. West with us from Manor Costred.
Yep, now I'm here.
Good evening, sir. Welcome.
Thank you. So just like to say thank you for having me. As you pointed out, my name is Nick West. I'm a manager in the audit department at Manor Costred. And so I just wanted to quickly go through some of the highlights of the 2019-2020 audit and the financial statements here. So if I can, Steve, if I can have you go to page 2, please. There we go. And right at the top, we got our opinion. So this is the reason that the district has the audit, express an opinion on the financial statements. And so at the very top, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to fairly in all material respects. So this right here is a clean opinion. This is the highest opinion that we, as your independent auditor, provide you. And this is consistent with the years past as well. So kudos to the district on another clean, good audit. And then I also just want to point out right below that, you'll see a new paragraph this year in our auditor's report. It just is an emphasis of a matter talking about how the district implemented GASB 84. This, if you can remember, is the fiduciary activities, essentially removing them from the fiduciary accounts and putting them more onto the fund level into the new special revenue fund this year. So just like to point that out. If you can go to page 4, please. So this right here is the start of the management's discussion and analysis, or the MD&A for short. This goes from page 4 to page 10. This is essentially just a Reader's Digest version of the financial statements. I think these statements are almost close to 80 pages right now. So I know not everybody quite wants to read all of those. So if you just want some highlights, this is exactly where to go to kind of point out all the good information that you need to know in the highlights for throughout the year. And one schedule I do want to show here would be on page 7. And this right here is the table of net position, or schedule of net position. I always like to point this out because at the bottom you'll see there negative 48 million, almost 49 million. That number will jump out to people and it'll scare them, but there's no reason to be scared. Well, essentially what that number is, this is the full government-wide accrual statements of the school district. So this includes all your fixed assets, your debt, your pension liability, OPEB liability. So this is different than your normal fund level. And essentially, probably about 99% of districts across the state all have a very large total net position deficit. That's mainly due to the net pension liability and the net OPEB, or other post-employment benefit liability. The district is required by accounting standards to put their proportionate share of the pension and OPEB liability on their statements or on their books. And so this is a state of Michigan liability. It's not the district. The district has no control over this. The district has been making all the required payments that it needs to. It's essentially just, like I said, an accounting standard that they have to put on there. So they keep saying that the pension liability is going to decrease. It increased for Hazel this year about $6 million. Every single district it increased this year. So hopefully that'll start going down sometime soon. I just want to point out there in the net position, you'll have this net investment and capital assets line right there. And that increased about 1.3 million. And essentially what that number tells me there is that the district is paying off its debt faster than their assets are depreciating. So that's all they see. And then we'll move on to page 14. So right here we have the governmental funds balance sheet. So this has all the major funds, which for this year were general fund, the 2018 capital projects bond funds, and sinking fund. And then you got your total non-major funds, which if you want more detail to that, that's in the very back of the statements. And across all funds this year, total assets ended up being about $33 million, with about 21 million, almost 22 million of that in the capital bonds project fund, and then about 7 million in the general fund. I will point out that these statements are as of 6/30/2020, and so this number only reflects what was back then in June. So it is not up to date as of December by any means. The total liabilities for the district across all funds was around $11 million, with about almost $4 million of that in the cap projects bond fund. And that's essentially some May and June work and retainage, accounts payable and retainage that just hadn't been paid by year end. That's all been paid off by now. And then in the general fund, there's about 5.4 million of liabilities, which is mainly just due to the district needing to accrue July and August teachers' salaries and benefits. And then there was about $2.7 million of a state aid note that was paid off in August of this year. If you go to the next page, please. This shows fund balance across all funds and their designations. So I'll point out that the 2018 Capital Projects Bond Fund, as of 6/30, had almost $18 million left in fund balance. This is restricted for capital projects funds. It can only be used for the purposes of the bond. It can't be used for salaries, benefits, anything of that sort. And then in the general fund, there was about $1.7 million of fund balance. And across all funds, you ended up with just under $22 million of fund balance. We go down to page 16. So one more down, please. This is the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance, or essentially your income statement. Across all funds, you had around $39 million worth of revenue, with the majority of that being in the general fund of slightly under 31 million. And that is mostly made up of your property taxes, state aid payments, some federal sources, and then the incoming transfers and other line is mostly made up of money coming in from the local ISD. Next page, please. This right here shows your total expenditures across all funds, around 63 million, with about 31 million of that being in the general fund. That's mostly made up of salaries and benefits. Your 2018 bond capital projects fund, the district ended up spending about $13.7 million of that bond fund as it continued to expand and build new capital improvements across the district. And then at the very bottom there, you'll see the net changes in fund balances. Across all funds, the district lost about $13 million of fund balance, which again is mostly just due to that 2018 bond capital projects fund, which makes sense. It should go down as you spend those funds for the purposes. I will point out the general fund ended up with about a $287,000 loss. I'll expand once we get into the budget. The budget and kind of expand on that a little further and kind of explain how that came to be. If we can go to page 20. This right here is the start of the notes to the financial statements. I won't get into too great a detail. They kind of get longer and longer every single year, but I will point out that the 2018 Capital Projects Fund was audited under the provisions of 1351A. So we're required as the auditor to look at those, make sure that they were spent for the expenditures, that they really were spent for what they're supposed to be under the bond purposes, that they're allowable. Same with the sinking fund, were also audited to make sure that they were under for allowable purposes, and I'm happy to note that we had no exceptions there. All right, I'm gonna have you jump a little bit farther, Steve, to page 52, so actually quite a bit farther. Perfect. So I'll just point out here, note 14 there, we were required due to GASB 84 to restate the fund balance and net position for the district. Sometimes people will see that and think that maybe there was a mistake or anything of that sort. Nothing to report for that. It was just required due to putting that new fiduciary funds onto the books. And then in note 15 there, just point out that there is a new accounting pronouncement coming up. GASB 87 related to leases. Don't think this is going to impact the district too much. Mostly looking at like charter schools who lease buildings, but if the district does end up leasing some buses or something of that sort, then that is something to consider and be aware of looking forward. And then finally, page 54. This is the budgetary comparison schedule. If you look at the bottom there, across the original and final budget called for a balanced budget, and the district ended up actually with about a $287,000 loss. I alluded to it earlier, but there is a reason for this. So if you remember back in the summer, the state of Michigan was having trouble with its budget and they were looking at ways to cut funds. They ended up cutting about $175 per pupil of all school districts across the state, their August state aid. So for Hazlitt, that ended up being about a $475,000 cut. So had that not occurred, the district would have added to fund balance by about $187,000, which is pretty typical to, for this district to beat their budget, which is great. So you got to kind of take that number with a little grain of salt there. And then there's no fault of the district. No one knew what was going to happen at that time. It was kind of just all hearsay, and then ended up in July. That's what the state decided to do. So as it sits right now, or as of 6:30, excuse me, the district ended up with a general fund balance as a percentage of expenditures of about 5.6%. Early warning legislation kicks in at about 5%. So that is something to consider. Had the cut not occurred, though, the district would have been at about 7.1%. So it would have been fairly healthy. So again, no fault of the district really there, but it is something to consider going forward for this next fiscal year. And so really, that's about all I had. I just wanted to say thanks to Rick Jensen and everyone in the business administration, the business office there. Thank you for all their help this year. It's been another great, clean audit, and I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. West. I want to invite any board members who have any questions. I know the Finance and Facilities Committee had an opportunity to review these numbers at length. Treasurer East, I don't know if you have any comments or anything to report back from that meeting. And I realize it was a while ago. We phoned this presentation, and I also want to thank Mr. West for accommodating us by not coming when we first were going to have you.
Yeah, just one really quick thing before I forget it. I was looking at my printed copy of the budget, and on that page 54, the title in my document says year ended June 30th, 2019. I think that needs to be corrected to 2020. Maybe it was on the version that was put up online. I was looking at the printed version that I had.
Yes, you are correct. That does need to be updated. That was a typo that ended up getting through. So I apologize for that.
Okay, no, that's okay, Nick. I hadn't noticed it earlier until just now. I just wanted to kind of bring everybody's attention back to what Nick said, in that it was what we have is an incredibly clean audit. There are no statements in here about anything that we need to do differently. So once again, we can be thankful at the fiduciary management by Rick Jensen and Steve Cook. So I'm very appreciative of that. I think the other thing with respect to the what Nick was just talking about with the budget, maybe Rick can speak briefly to this, but I believe the $175 cut has been essentially restored in the current budget with some additional federal funds past the state. So we get a little bit of help in making our current budget more whole than it looks like at the end of 2020. Am I right about that, Rick?
Yes, they did cut us $175 per pupil for prior year, but they did give us for this current year going forward $350. So they gave us the $175 back plus $175. So and our intent is to restore that amount back into the fund balance that we weren't able to add prior year.
Yeah, so that's helpful to us. The other thing, it just escaped me again. I had it and I lost it and I came back. The other thing I just wanted to bring it to the board's attention that much of the bond work that was done over the summer does not show up in this audit because a lot of those expenditures were made after June 30th. So next year in the audit, you will see a large percentage of those funds are going to show up from all the work this summer will be in next year's audit.
Correct.
And I guess I just had, we didn't really look at it here, but I just had one question that maybe Rick can address briefly, and then he can follow up further with the board when we have a budget amendment to this year's budget, which we'll have to do at some point here. And that is the district's paying down of its debt. We are paying down some of our revolving loan fund debt with the state, and that we do have hopes that in a fairly short number of years, we can pay down a good part of our debt. Is that fair, Rick?
Yes. Yeah, we're actually currently borrowing from the school bond loan fund. And in, I believe, 2 years, we will be at a point, because we'll pay off some of our other bonded debt, we'll be at a point where we'll start paying that down, and we should be out of the, completely paid off out of the school bond loan fund by 2030.
So that's a very positive fiscal outlook for us to be able to like finally get out of needing to rely on that, you know, resource to cover the few months that we need it to cover every year in the budget. So that's a positive outlook for the district. And that's all I wanted to point out with the audit.
Excellent, thank you. Other questions or comments from board members? All right, seeing.
Quick question, just about that GASB 87, Nick, and I know you said it doesn't come into effect for a couple of years, but when it's talking about leases, is that any lease held by the district? So if like we're leasing our copy machines or anything like that, or is it just for larger, you mentioned like buildings and buses?
So yes, it would be for all types of leases, but there is a materiality aspect there. So your copier lease, for how big of a district Hazlitt is, your copier lease and stuff of that sort probably won't be impacted by it. We'll probably say it's immaterial, and it'll probably just stick to how it's been in the past.
Just something to keep an eye out for in a couple of years.
Molly, just for clarification, we currently don't have any leases in the district, including copiers or anything. So at this point, we don't have any leases at all in the district.
Thank you, Steve. I couldn't remember, so.
A great clarification and a great question, so thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we will move on to item number 2 in the discussion portion of the agenda, recommendation to purchase Chromebooks and Chrome management licenses. Mr. Casson?
Yes, good evening. I'm here tonight to recommend the purchase of 200 Chromebooks. This would be for the 21-22 school year. As you recall, I recommended back in September the purchase of 450 Chromebooks specifically for Wiltshire, also for the 2021 school year. At the time, I thought that we would just go with the 450 Chromebooks and wouldn't have a need to purchase additional Chromebooks. But looking at our inventory, if we were to only get the 450 Chromebooks, we would be in a position a year from now, or really a year and a half from now, where we would have really about 1,300 Chromebooks to replace, which that would fall well outside of our budget. And so we do need to be proactive and continue on this annual replacement plan that we've established. Now, our budget, what we budget for with the sinking fund is a replacement of about 750 Chromebooks per year. Now that we're in a one-to-one situation, we need fewer Chromebooks. However, rather than replacing them every 5 years, we will be planning to replace them every 4 years because of the anticipated wear and tear of Chromebooks that are going home with students and back to school and so forth. So assuming we do continue that one-to-one program, we would need to purchase about 675 Chromebooks per year, so that in a 4-year cycle, we replace about 2,700 Chromebooks, which is our student population. So by purchasing the additional 200 Chromebooks now, in addition to the 450 we purchased back in September, that would put us at 650. Keep in mind that this purchase, even though it's December 2020, this purchase is for the summer of 2021. Because of COVID and the demand for Chromebooks, there's currently about a 6-month backlog on Chromebooks. So if we put the order in today, we would expect to receive these in June. So my recommendation is to purchase the additional 200 Chromebooks, $215 each from Intercom Computers. There's also the Chrome management license. We would have to purchase with that at $23.50 each. So the total for this purchase would be $47,700. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but my recommendation would be for the board to approve this at its next meeting.
So Tammy, I have a question of Rick.
Go ahead.
So, or sorry, Jeff. So we're going to approve this in this budget year, but there is still an outside chance that the Chromebooks might not be here until July or August with the backlog. So is there potential that the expenditure would actually show up in the next budget?
We would pay for these when we receive them, when we get the invoice. So there is the potential that it would occur after July 1st.
Okay.
This is where I may need Rick's help. This is sinking fund dollars. And so I'm not sure, Rick, if you can comment as to, I guess, the importance of that purchase happening within the current school year.
For sinking fund purchases, it's really not essential that we get it before the end of June. That fund balance will carry over, and those funds will still be there to use in July or August whenever we need to use them.
And that's what I would have expected. I just wanted to be on our radar that we're approving, but there's a chance that we'll just have to keep our eye that the expenditure could get carried over and be made in the next, under the next budget, not this budget.
Correct.
And as was noted, it's a purchase intended for the use during the next school year. So
That's
that
correct.
part, it makes sense, but in terms of where we're budgeting and which pot of money we're coming from, yes, it's important for us to know which fiscal year we're talking about. Any other questions about the request? Actually, I do have a question. It's related. You mentioned the wear and tear because of students having them at home, using them kind of every day, all day, as opposed to more sporadically when they're in the buildings. Are there sort of in the moment now concerns about that? Are you having to do any kind of emergency replacement type of situations?
Yes, we're swapping out Chromebooks on a fairly regular basis. One of our biggest issues we're seeing right now are broken screens. And so, we are repairing those. We've probably had maybe about 10 broken screens since the beginning of the school year. Aside from that, we've had a couple of accidents, water spilled on one. And other than that, it really has been the broken screens. So, yeah, we have spent a couple $1,000s this year on parts for repairs, which we anticipated.
Mm-hmm. Well, we appreciate that extra effort on yours and your department dealing with things that, well, as we're all dealing with things we wouldn't have anticipated, but we appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're all set then to move on to discussion item number 3. This is our COVID-19 extended learning plan. It's the monthly reconfirmation of data, or not data, but of the plan.
Yes, President Lumber, as required by the state, every month we have to resubmit any changes to our plan. And so we submitted our plan last month. The plan that we're submitting this month actually doesn't have any changes other than the fact that we did pause our learning labs during the month of November. So that's really the only change to our current plan. We're required to post these on the website. So as soon as the board, after tonight, will post the new plan, but that's the only change that you'll see from the prior month. In addition to that, we're also required to discuss the student attendance data, which is also required to be posted on the website. It's actually up to date through last week. We're seeing those numbers be pretty consistent across the board in terms of attendance. As you may recall, we're only required to report the two-way attendance for students, which means that they have to basically be logged in or answer an email or have a conversation with the teacher twice during that reporting period. So those percentages are also, as I mentioned, reported on the website. So as a part of our submittal, we'll also submit not only the change in the learning plan, but the current attendance data along with that. So that's pretty much it. Not many changes since last month. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So process question, we did not make a vote or affirm anything last month because there were no changes. You just mentioned that technically there has been a change because we did pause the learning labs. Does that mean we as a board need to affirm or vote on anything?
No, we don't have to vote on this. We just have to submit it, but we do have to discuss it at the board meeting. That's part of the requirement. So that's why we're showing and mentioning what the changes are and also reporting the attendance data as required. So we don't have to formally approve it. We just have to submit it to the state on a monthly basis.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Mm-hmm.
Any comments or questions from board members? And so that data, it will go up on the website tomorrow because it needed to come through us first, correct?
Correct. The attendance data is being reported weekly, so that's actually currently up to date. The new plan will be posted tomorrow after this evening. So, and all of those plans every month are on that web page that you can go back and review if you need to.
Great, thank you.
Is the attendance data broken out by building that we share, or is it across the district?
We just have to report across the district data, but it is broken out by building on our web page.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? All right, I'm not seeing or hearing anybody. Thank you, Mr. Cook. So we'll move on to our action items. And Ms. Palvarento, I'll turn to you to walk us through the Neola resolution.
Again, this was available to everybody in the drive, and we discussed it at our last meeting. But Neola provided us with a resolution that says that we, the Board of Education, authorize the superintendent to create procedures to accommodate electronic participation by board members who are absent. And this resolution basically would be us affirming, putting in place the procedures and the requirements for being able to meet electronically through the end of this calendar year, and that for next calendar year, we would allow electronic participation solely under the circumstances that were set out by the legislation and are affirmed in this resolution. So it just kind of formalizes what we've all been asked to do and what was authorized under the legislation passed, I believe it was 2 months ago, but I'm losing track. So I don't know if there are any specific questions or if anybody had questions if they looked it over in the drive or when we discussed it a few weeks ago. And this was legislation that amended the Open Meetings Act during the pandemic.
And just to reiterate, that legislation did authorize us to hold remote meetings for any purpose through the end of the calendar year, as you mentioned, and the specific circumstances where it would be allowable in 2021 include medical condition or due to a statewide or local state of emergency. And as is the case currently in Ingham County, we are under what would be considered a local state of emergency. So we will monitor those conditions going forward if we pass this.
Thank you for that clarification.
What was that?
Thank you for making that clarification.
Yeah, no.
Excuse me, sorry.
Are there any other questions or clarifications needed? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept the Neola resolution.
Move acceptance of the Neola resolution.
Well, second.
Okay, motion Eve, second Paul Varento.
Mhm.
Any further discussion? We'll move to a vote. I will do a roll call, I think. East,
Yes.
Paul Varento. We're doing a roll call vote. Did you say yes?
Yes.
Sorry. Wheeler,
Yes.
Maury,
Yes.
Collins,
Yes.
Rashad,
Yes.
and Lemmer is yes. Motion carries. Thank you very much. We're now on to board reports, finance and facilities. I know we heard, well, actually, no, I'm sorry. I was gonna say the audit was not at your last meeting, but so let's hear
No.
about your last meeting.
No, the audit was a couple of meetings ago. We did have a meeting, and we had a very, very good conversation with Dr. Terry Flanaugh from MSU, who's been working on a proposal for a district-wide equity plan and how to implement that. So it was a very, very good discussion and conversation. I'm looking forward to more on that. We had a presentation by the building principals, all of the building principals, about the assessment data that had been collected so far for this school year. And it was very informative. There were some positive results. There are some worrisome spots that the administrators and staff are turning their attention to for individuals or grade-wise basis. We talked about the state of our planning on the responsive return to school planning and the development of the cohorts and the scheduling in the secondary buildings. We had an update about the food service management and the aftermath of the tragic loss of Lynna Hassinger, who was the manager for Okemos Williamston and Hazlitt, and died in a tragic car accident. So we are going to be having to take some action and as to how we go forward with food service management. And that's the summary of what we talked about.
Great. Any questions or comments? Okay, we'll go on to policy and personnel, please.
So we had a very similar agenda at our meeting a couple of weeks ago. Spent some good time with Dr. Flanow talking about his proposal and different ideas to engage our community members in this work, in this equity plan, including our Hazlitt Voices for Change, which has been reaching out to us as well. So it was good to hear how all those pieces hopefully will be coming together as the district moves forward. We also reviewed the data with our school principals and appreciated the time they all took. Again, it was good to hear about kind of the strategies that they're already putting in place and what they're thinking about doing to address those areas of concern in that fall assessment data. And we also discussed the food service management plans moving forward with the loss that everybody experienced, as well as the return to school planning.
All right, very similar agendas. Any questions? Okay, so speaking of Hazlitt Voices for Change, Mr. Cook, any updates or any follow-up, especially coming out of those committee meetings and the conversations with Dr. Flanow?
Only to note that as a part of the survey that we are going to be putting out to our families and students, that he was in contact with that organization as we put that survey together. But nothing more than that. He's been working not only with our board on the equity plan, but he's also been working with our individual buildings doing work, PD, at the building level. So we've got a lot of positive feedback from his work.
Great, thank you very much. Board members, any questions or comments? Okay, we are at items from board members.
Tammy?
Go ahead.
nobody else has anything to say, I'd like to say something because this is really kind of my last official board meeting before my term closes. We may have another one later in December. But if you don't mind, I'd like to say a little something, my thoughts.
Please do. I'm showing that we do have a board meeting on the 28th, and it was my intent to acknowledge your departure at that point, but we would love to hear your thoughts now.
Okay. I just wanted to reflect a little bit about what I've encountered in my 6 years of service on the board, because there has been the unexpected twist and turn during my service. You know, we had our usual staffing changes, though our turnover was probably pretty high with the age of our administrative team and our teaching staff. We've had a fair amount of turnover during my service. We had some really exciting changes to our curriculum to continually improve the reading and math, science, and social studies in our district. We've had tremendous advances and improvements in special needs education through the LINKS program and the expansion of that program and the offering of local job apprentices to our students and other efforts. We launched, of course, the successful bond proposal to make very necessary improvements in our facilities, and we've all been very grateful for our communities for that support. And of course, I had the great joy, and here I'll tear up, of giving my sons their diplomas, even if one of them was a little bit unusual and a throwback ceremony on the football field this summer. But we've also, faced the unexpected tragedies in the loss of students, teachers, and a principal in the past 6 years. And through these very difficult challenges, we had administrators and teachers lead our district in the development of a remarkable plan for a crisis team that has put our district in good stead to be able to meet challenges when they arise. And I'm tremendously appreciative of the administrative team and the teachers for collaborating and working very hard in the development of that tool for our district. And of course, now we're in a pandemic that nobody anticipated, which has greatly challenged our community at every level and tasked us with addressing innumerable challenges. And there is absolutely no template for any school district to follow as we meet these sorts of challenges. But through all of the challenges now and in the past that our district has faced, I have witnessed an incredible level of constructive, collaborative work by our administrators, by our teachers, students, and the community. And these relationships have been strained by the stress of this pandemic. Still, every collaborator is trying to find a path to deliver the best possible educational outcome for our students. A higher level of disagreement has surfaced as we struggle through this pandemic. But please, everyone, don't forget that we are all motivated to do what is best for our students. Doing best for our students often means doing what puts our teachers and our administrators in a position to succeed. We have not reached the end of our pandemic struggles, but we are going to emerge from this. And when we do emerge, let's remember that Haslett Public Schools is what it is because we collaborate and we allow our highly qualified professional educators, our teachers and administrators, to lead us to continually improve and offer the best education possible. As the pandemic has illustrated, our society expects our schools to do far more than tend to the reading, writing, math, science, and social studies education of our students. Schools are expected to tend to the socialization of our students, be watchdogs of mental and physical health, provide healthy meals, be a safe haven, provide childcare, and tend to many other daily needs. As the pandemic ends, we will continue to tend to all of the educational and other needs of our students. But let's remember to extend grace to one another and move forward in the collaborative manner that has always been our approach to building and maintaining an outstanding public school district. We're going to need to address differences as we emerge from the pandemic and recognize that we may have more in common and the differences were related to the pandemic. Or the differences are deeper and we need to resolve those. Let's not let differences fester and pollute the collaborative environment that we will restore in Hazlet when we emerge from this pandemic. And we will be stronger and unfortunately more knowledgeable about many things than we ever thought we needed to be when we emerge. But I've been thankful for my service here on the board. Thanks.
Oh, well, thank you, Karen. That's hard to top. Does anyone have anything else to share before we wrap up? And again, we will offer our more formal gratitude on the 28th, Karen, but thank you for those words and thank you for your service. All right, I think we will move on to our consent agenda then. We have 4 items. Seems anticlimactic after that, but we're gonna go for it. Item number 1, approval of the minutes of the November 23rd, 2020 regular school building. Item number 2, approval of minutes of the December 1st, 2020 Finance and Facilities meeting. Number 3, approval of the minutes from the December 2nd Policy and Personnel Committee meeting. And item number 4, the 2021 summer tax certification notice, which was attachment F in our board packets. Does anyone have any reason to pull any of these items for further clarification or discussion? Hearing, seeing none, I will request a motion to approve, or I should say, is there a motion, period?
I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
I second.
Motion Wheeler, second Maury. Thank you very much. Any, there's no discussion because it's consent agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. So I'll move on to announcements then. We do have a Finance and Facilities Committee meeting scheduled for December 15th at 9 a.m. that will be held in the boardroom of the administration building. We have a Policy and Personnel Committee meeting scheduled for the December 16th at 2 p.m. And that will also be held in the boardroom at the admin building. As noted, we do have a special Board of Education meeting on December 28th at 7 p.m. It's only called a special meeting because it was not one of the original meetings approved at the beginning of the year. We've just added that meeting so that we have the opportunity to address any of the constantly changing issues and factors that we've all been facing this year. Likely to be a brief meeting, but it will be held via Zoom. And then we have our first regularly scheduled board meeting for calendar year 2021 that will be held on January 11th. That will be at 7 p.m. and we will determine whether that's an in-person or remote meeting in part depending on the status of whether we're in a state of emergency at that point based on Ingham County Health Department. So I am at the end of the agenda and will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move that we adjourn.
Motion Collins, do we have a second? Paul Varento, seconds. Any questions or discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.